This is a refresher. All right. Today's session, we actually have a set of presentations from 3 awesome speakers and Q&A following. I'm going to introduce myself, Maheen Mem, and we're switching things up. I know Star usually does the moderating, so I'm part of the CS and Focus team. I also have Star here as well, who's going to be helping me moderate, then monitoring the chat as we go on. So just before we get started, just some housekeeping. We'd love to share a little bit from our sponsors. So I'm going to leave it, just kick it off to Star. If you don't mind just kicking things off, that'd be great.
Sure thing. Do you want to flip over slides? Oh, you already did. Never mind. I got too many windows open. All right. Well, our first sponsor up, we wouldn't be here we are today without our incredible sponsors. The first one is from Milo Associates. Milo is a recruiting firm based in Chicago, and they focus on customer success and technology hiring. And they're striving to be the #1 talent resources in North America for our lovely CS team. Their mission is to create opportunities that are mutually beneficial, embracing the strengths and values of both the individual and the organization, ensuring professional satisfaction is a two-way street. Milo Associates is a silver sponsor of ours. Next up, we have our gold sponsors, our friends over at Catalyst. To speak a little bit more about Catalyst, I'm going to pass it over to Stacy.
Oops. Hey, Stacy.
Awesome. I always feel like the elephant in the room during this. It's like a salesperson in a CS meeting. It's like, get her out of here. Also, I'm in New York. I'm like, this is so bad.
You're not sales. Sales and CS are friends. We're amongst friends here, Stacy.
That's true. Yeah, a quick intro to Catalyst. If you haven't heard of us, Catalyst is a customer success platform. Our focus in the space is really helping CS teams bring customer success to the center. So we think of that in 2 ways. A tool that is super user-friendly, easy for CSMs. It actually helps CSMs like get through their day-to-day, back-to-back of meetings, escalations, tracking adoption, all of that. But also Catalyst is not a seat-based platform. So thinking about how often are salespeople, marketing, product asking CSMs for a list of customers, or tell me who meets this criteria, or can you work together with me on a case study? You have the ability to really do all of that within Catalyst, and that is our focus. So if you want to learn more, I think Maheen will share the link. You can request a demo. Otherwise, always feel free to reach out to any of us directly at Catalyst.
Thanks, Stacy. That was great. Yeah, we will be sharing the link after this session if you want to learn more about Catalyst. So appreciate that. All right, just before we head into our speakers, just wanted to give everyone a heads up. Our next event will actually be in September. Dates TBD. We're going to be on break for July and August. So you'll be hearing about our new theme for the quarter coming up in August as we start our planning up again. So wanted just everyone to share that. All right. Okay, without further ado, we're going to get started. So we have 3 awesome speakers. We have Zach from Salesforce, Bora from ChurnZero, and Geoff from PartnerStack. They're going to speak about how they've actually made their way into customer success and also pivoted outside of that. So we're going to first start off with Zach. So Zach, if you want to take over the screen while I introduce you. So Zach actually started off his career as a teacher, and then he pivoted his way over to customer success and joined Loopio. After that, he moved into sales at Loopio and then joined Salesforce about 4 months ago. So he's going to be speaking about his journey specifically and what helped him move into the roles that he is in today. All right, thanks, Zach. Over to you. Zach, you're on mute. Oh, can you unmute yourself? Oops. Not sure.
There we go. Am I back?
Excellent.
That's the word. What a way to start a presentation in front of a group of people. Hi, everybody. I'm Zach. Really nice to meet you. And I'm going to talk about, like Maheen was saying, start getting into customer success and then transitioning to another role from customer success. So I have a bit of an interesting story. Is I really transitioned industries when I started, but a little bit just about me before I talk about professional experience, just to get to know me a little bit, a quick snapshot. I'm currently an account executive at Salesforce. I am a dad. I live in Toronto. I have 2 dogs, so you might hear some barking while I'm speaking, so I apologize. I'm also one of the last remaining Survivor fans, huge fan, plan on being on the show, and I'll probably win when I am on it. It's a little bit about me. And I want to get into my professional background. So I worked in education for almost 10 years. It was like 9 years, 8.5 years before transitioning into tech. And it's funny because a lot of people make the joke now that I went from the good side, which is teaching, to the dark side because I'm in sales now. Though I do think that calling sales the dark side is a huge misconception, but I do appreciate the humor that comes with that joke. And I'm going to be using a lot of education-based stories as I talk today, but everything that I'm going to talk about is completely applicable to any field that you work in, and how you can still use your experience to transition into a CS role. At least that's the goal. If not, you could always email me after. I'm happy to chat. But I started out my career as a behavior therapist. So I did work with kids with autism. And after a few years of doing that, I got my graduate degree in education and worked at a public school for a little bit. I actually did that in Australia. Then I worked in Australia at some Australian public schools before moving back to Canada. Over here, I got some pictures of like Ontario Teachers College. So I was a teacher in Ontario. And there's me actually teaching a class there as well, to give you some context to my life before working customer success. When I moved back to Toronto, I worked in the public school system for a bit before actually partnering with a family here to start an independent school for kids with autism. And it was here where I really fell in love with the technological side and the business side of growing a school. I loved teaching. I still do love teaching, but it was a new experience to really get involved with marketing to grow our client base and working with different tech companies that we incorporated into our tech stack for teaching and managing relationships with other schools, because we had a lot of partnerships with other Toronto private schools. And it was after a couple years of doing this when I really found myself enjoying that aspect of my job a little bit more than the teaching aspect of my job. It's really kind of got me fired up as I came into work every day. Like, I liked managing these relationships, making sure everything was set up, growing the school. And it's not that teaching didn't, it's not that I didn't enjoy teaching, it just didn't get me as excited as the other aspects of the job that I was doing did. And it was around that point that I started just considering a career change and started looking into what's possible based on what I'm enjoying right now. How can I do this more? So I started having conversations with friends, acquaintances. I had a bunch of friends who worked in tech, and it was really a lot of those relationships with the companies I was working with that I found most interesting. So I asked for intros to anybody who would talk to me at an ed tech company. Very exploratory, high-level conversations just to understand what was out there, what was possible for me as somebody who didn't have a tech background. And what sort of role made the most sense for me if I was going to pursue something. I learned a lot about different companies and how their businesses worked, and in doing that, learned about customer success and found that there are a ton of transferable skills from teaching to customer success. But that being said, there's a lot of transferable jobs. If you have a job where it's very relationship focused, there are going to be a ton of transferable skills that will make you a good customer success manager. Like, think about training, coaching, relationship management, teaching. All of those are skills I used when I was a customer success manager. But I did find myself hitting a wall where I had no formal tech experience. Like, ironically, working with Salesforce, I had never done that before. And that people were not so keen on having me come on board without that sort of experience. So I started trying to buff up my resume a bit to show that I do have some tech experience. So I did a bit of consulting with a friend of a friend, starting a video game for an education-based video game to teach social skills to kids with autism. I did some consulting there and to include that on my resume, and that was helpful. It's a small thing, but I found it helped me get through the door a little bit. But another change I made was I branched out a bit and started having conversations with companies outside of ed tech. I initially thought ed tech was going to be my only entry point because I was a teacher, but it definitely was not the case. This was actually where the most doors opened up, because startups, especially here in Toronto, they're really keen on having a well-rounded team with a very diverse skill set that complement each other. And so everybody can kind of learn skills from somebody else. Everyone thinks of things differently, which is awesome. And I ended up at a company called Lupio. I see some of my coworkers and actually my former manager in here as well. And Lupio was quite small when I joined, and they actually loved the fact that I had a different background from the other customer success managers on the team, and I could bring a fresh perspective. And not having experience with software wasn't a concern for them because that's something that they could teach me. It was more the unteachable skills that I actually possessed as a teacher, like relationship building and being able to establish a pretty quick rapport with somebody. And that's what they were more interested in. They could teach you. There's things you could teach. There's things you can't teach, right? And this is actually a big green flag. If companies who are open to having people who have different backgrounds, not necessarily years of experience doing one specific thing. I do find that some of the most successful companies and teams that I know have people from so many different industries who make up those teams. So I loved being a customer success manager, and I excelled at it. I started as an associate. I then became a manager. And the biggest benefit of working in CS is that you get to work with nearly every team at your company: marketing, product, sales, operations, you name it, you'll get to work with them. And as I started to excel from an expansion perspective, because when I was a CSM, we were measured on retention and expansion. And I really found myself, I was the most fired up working big expansion opportunities. I love getting strategic and working with companies to find where can they grow and help them do that. And as I started to excel at that, I spent more time with our sales team just to understand how I could level up and be more strategic and maybe adopt some of their techniques to be a better CSM. And I really liked their techniques. The more time I spent with them, I realized, the part I like most about my job, they're doing the entire day. It might make sense to maybe explore this transition. So I started to dig into how my CS skills could be transferable to an account executive role. And if I want to be able to focus on the right things to fill in any gaps. So I started meeting with sales managers and sales leaders on my team to just learn a little bit more about the day-to-day and put it out there, just put my hand up that I was intrigued, I was interested about joining the team. I was relatively tenured at Lupio at this point. So the sales leaders knew, about my background, what I was good at, where I would need to grow a little bit. And we discussed my gaps and what I'd have to work on. And what I did was over the next 4 or 5 months after starting this conversation, just honed in on some skills that I knew I didn't have. For example, I never ran a full sales cycle as a CSM. So I tried to work with customers who had maybe acquired another company and we're going to bring larger new teams on board to get my feet wet and kind of get that experience as a CSM. And one thing to kind of think about is moving internally from CS to sales specifically. Everything about the product, which makes you a very good salesperson because you could answer a lot of questions without needing to get a CSM involved. So there's a lot of less risk too, just for management, bringing somebody from one internal team over to the other because they know you, they know where you excel, where you might struggle, and ramp will probably be a little bit quicker too. And it was about maybe we were chatting for 4 or 5 months and I worked on some of these skills before there was an opening, and I interviewed for it formally, and I did end up moving over to the sales team at Lupio as an account executive. I was there for almost 2 years. My manager's in here today, so I'm excited to get some feedback from him on this presentation. But to wrap things up, and I know I was moving quick, so everyone feel free to add me on LinkedIn and you can shoot me questions. I try to answer all of my direct messages there. But just as some key takeaways, when you're transitioning into CS, include some tech experience if you have it on your resume, even if it's a bit of a stretch. Sometimes it helps just get you in the door. If somebody might be a little reserved about, like I was saying, the walls I was hitting, although this was a few years ago. Talk to smaller companies. I just find in my experience, a lot of smaller companies, as they're growing, they want to have that well-rounded team as it's small. As they get bigger, sometimes the I don't know, expectations is the right word, but that experience may play a bigger role. And I just found that smaller companies were more open to more diverse backgrounds in terms of not having as many years experience doing that specific role. Meet with leaders from other teams and put your hand up. If you don't put your hand up, they're not going to know you're interested. And if they know you're interested, they may give you the resources, give you some training, some coaching to get better, to get to that other job that you might be interested in. and ask yourself what you enjoy most in your day-to-day. When I was a CSM, I enjoyed expansion opportunities and driving upgrades. And that is all I do in sales now. So I now do the thing I enjoyed most in a new role. And just double down what you're good at. If you're good at something, like one specific thing, double down on that. It will show, your managers will see it, other teams will see it, and it'll open up a bunch of doors for you. I have 30 seconds overtime, so I am going to stop it there. Have a thank you, everybody.
That was great, Zach. Thank you for sharing your story. It's such a unique background to where you're at right now. I'm glad to see that you're enjoying what you do day to day. So there were some questions that came in. I don't know, Star, do you want to?
I did write them down.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Go ahead.
So, and if you have not yet put in your questions, drop them in chat. I'm keeping a list. So first question is kind of relevant to your topic. There are a few questions here that could be asked to any of the leaders that's here. It's more specific to customer success. But this one was, I know you kind of talked to and allude to it, but maybe more directly answer this question is, what made you transition from the CSM to AE specifically? Like you mentioned, for example, that you were really intrigued on the sales motion side of things. But what really made you kind of have the aha moment and make the switch?
So it's interesting because I was actually initially interested in moving to an account management role, which is a little more like you're working with existing customers. And I thought that was going to be a transition that made a little more sense for me. So I was actually chatting with that team as well as our sales team. And I didn't think that I'd be able to, like, what I enjoyed most about CS, there was obviously that expansions side of things I really liked, but I had like real genuine like friendships with some of the customers I worked with. And I think that made me a better CSM. But also it's really nice because it's long-term. Customers are your customers for years. So I really enjoyed these relationships that I had. And I was worried I wouldn't be able to have that as an AE, but I would be able to have that as an AM. But as I chatted with leadership on the sales team, they pointed out to me, they kind of pointed out a few of like the top performing AEs who have the best relationships there for years with some of our customers that they brought on. He said, he's like, the best AEs have those fantastic relationships with customers. It doesn't matter if you're going to be managing their account or not, you still maintain those. And that's something that the best ones do. And when that kind of opened up for me, I realized like, okay, that is something I am more interested in, because that was the reason I was actually a little averse to the AE role. But then it was really just came down to like, I'm kind of geeky when it comes to like negotiating and strategy. And I get to do that way, like a little bit more, not way more, because a CS role is also quite strategic and you have to really think about how you're going to work with your accounts. But in terms of moving really quickly with new accounts, it's just something I got to do more of. And I was just most intrigued by it. I don't know if that answers your question, but does that kind of answer it a little bit more?
It does. It does. There's a lot of individuals in our group today that are brand new to customer success. And their entry into customer success, and there's some more tactical things they have. So I'm going to take you back to your roots of a customer success manager, so putting that hat on. One of them is, and this is something that's kind of relevant in sales as well, so you don't necessarily have to put your CSM hat on. It's, when do you balance interaction versus quality interactions that you might have? Because even though you might be a CSM and you're reaching out to an individual, quality is king, right? You want to make sure you're having quality interactions that's there. How do you balance when you're really just trying to get in the door versus quality?
I like personally, I'm going to talk about both like phone and email. Like if I'm sending an email to somebody, whether it's, and this applies to like you said, started to CS or sales. If I read back my email and I'm putting myself in the person's shoes that I'm sending it to, if there's nothing there that is, they'll read and be like, or just say, take something away from it. If it's just like, hey, how are you? Like, I won't send it if there's not a piece of content in that email or something I'm going to say to them over the phone that won't be valuable to them. And that comes down to, I guess, knowing who you're speaking to and doing some research too on who you're talking to. But every interaction, in my opinion, should be a quality interaction. And if you're thinking about I'm thinking from the customer's perspective, because the customer should always be like the number one priority. If it is not going to benefit them in some way, it's probably not a quality interaction. You probably don't need to have a phone call. That's a good way to know if you have to have a phone call too. But if I read something back that just doesn't seem valuable to the person I'm sending it to, or there's not like an aha thing in that email or that I'm going to say over the phone, probably I probably wouldn't send that email or have that call.
Excellent. Last question before we move to the next speaker. You know, for individuals that are brand new to CSM or even transitioning, and as a teacher yourself that was getting into the space and having to really learn how to be a CSM, what is a resource that you would direct somebody to kind of, other than CSM Focus, shameless plug, other than CSM Focus or Catalyst, our gold sponsor that's on the call here today, where else would you go to get additional information on how to be a great CSM?
Honestly, go to LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. Most people on there are pretty open to chatting. Like I've had people just reach out to me like, hey, I saw, it's like actually to this question exactly. I saw you were a CSM and you were, had a couple of different CS type roles before transitioning to sales. Are you open to having a 15-minute conversation? I've had probably 15 or 20 of those conversations. I'll almost always have it. So I would find people whose career path is something you'd like to emulate, or you just are you think they did a good job. There's something you'd like to learn from them. Send them a message. I'd be very surprised if they wouldn't be open to getting on a call with you. I would go right to the source, find somebody who did what you're looking to do, and ask them to have a. I mean, it's easier now because we could just hop on Zoom and chat. You don't have to take them for a coffee. But I would, LinkedIn would be my my recommendation.
All right.
Excellent. All right, Maheen.
All right, awesome. I love the LinkedIn plug. I'm a former LinkedIner, and I would say as a tip, if you're going to reach out to anyone on LinkedIn, make sure you put a note versus just adding them, because I think the note adds color as to why you want to reach out to them. So that's just a little bit of a tip for those who are new to LinkedIn. All right, Bora, you're up. So I'm going to get you set up. I'm going to introduce you. So Bora is the manager of customer enablement at ChurnZero. She is passionate about helping customers succeed at crafting big picture strategies executed through automated, streamlined processes that puts the right data, communication, and resources in front of the customer at exactly the right time. She works hand in hand with the customer success team to create fruitful long-term relationships to maximize their customer satisfaction. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Bora.
Thank you very much. So I'll just kind of kick off with introducing myself again. I run our customer success enablement team, and really what that means for us is operations, training, and community all fit under that umbrella. Just some fun facts about who I am. I've kind of been in the space for the last 12 years, but I love scuba diving, travel, and fitness. So if you have any recommendations, please feel free to send them my way. I'm based out of the Washington, D.C. area, so on the East Coast here of the U.S. And really, I am passionate about just being able to help people, right? It doesn't matter if that's a customer, it doesn't matter if that's a friend, if that's, somebody I've just met. I am really, really passionate about that. So in terms of just kind of what my journey looked like here, I really started actually in finance. So I graduated with a degree in economics and finance. I ended up actually starting at a company in Korea, so based out of Seoul, Korea, and I lived abroad for about 8 years before I actually came back to the States. And there I did something called fund accounting, which is having to do with the market and bringing in different type of instruments. It is probably just as boring as it sounds. You working with a lot of numbers and data and that type of thing in Seoul. When I was there, I had the opportunity to actually meet an individual who was starting a string of gyms, of CrossFit gyms. And I was actually the kind of quarterback of the business operations. So completely kind of different realm in terms of the finance stock market world. But rather it kind of put me in the front seat of being able to understand just how a business functions, right? What is important in a business? Is it money? Is it people? Is it the operations? How do you scale a business? And we actually took that one gym, and by the time I left, we had like 12 gyms. So we were operating, doing the accounting, scaling, staffing for 12 gyms. And so that really helped me to understand a lot of the just nitty gritty things that as an individual contributor for a company, it doesn't matter what company, you're probably not going to get into that until you're at the higher levels. So being able to understand what that meant was really, really important. I think just in the understanding of where I wanted to be and how that matched my personality. When I came back to the States, I actually started out as a leasing consultant. So I was working kind of at a random job where I was just like, okay, I got to find a good position, but I wasn't willing to sacrifice what I wanted for, just what I had. So I did leasing for a little bit. I like to think that I can take takeaways and learn from that role. And I think what that really gave me was the ability to strike up a conversation with anybody, anywhere, around anything. Before that, I was more reserved. I'm not a super social or outgoing person. So that kind of ability to innately connect with somebody on a level and just understand what they're looking for, I think was an interesting takeaway from that particular job. And I ended up finding a really good position at a local SaaS startup company in DC. With that role, I think it really, I started out in account management at that time. And honestly, when I really started in operations, there was no thing called customer success. We kind of named it account management / we want to be proactive, but it wasn't around. So I moved into an associate account management role at a company called Receipt Bank. And I was fortunate enough to be able to connect and have mentors there that allowed me to explore, much like Zach, the different areas of the business. They had needs that just fit at that time where I was willing to put my hand up and say, yeah, like put me in, coach. I want to learn about this role. You don't have any processes around that. You don't have anything there. You want somebody to research, you want somebody to work hard and try to figure out what that role looks like. Please, pick me. So I actually moved from associate account management into new business development, into an operations / kind of sales role there. And then I finally moved into our key accounts team. So working with consulting and rolling out for very large Fortune 500 companies. So that kind of pivoted me a little bit in what I now know. So a little bit about business. I know a little bit about sales and kind of how to position for value in those C-suite conversations. I know a little bit about account management and kind of how to get companies to adopt. And then I decided to move away from there and I focused on what was brand new at the time, which is customer success, right? Where it's still kind of in its infancy, it's still kind of maturing. What does that mean? And to me, that customer success meant being proactive, being able to have a single place to find all my data, being able to really provide value to a customer in a way that I couldn't just with an email here and there, a call here and there. And I found a company that seemed to align and that I wished I had in my previous roles. So that's where I actually moved into the customer success manager space, translating some of those key account kind of skill set and personalities into that CS role. Once I was there, I realized, hey, this is a really good opportunity for me to go back to my roots, which is operations. I love to be able to scale. I like to identify gaps. I love to translate those into real outcomes. And there was an opportunity on the team where, it just happened to fit. My boss was able to see what I was passionate about and know that this was kind of the right strategic move for both the company and for myself. And then I was able to kind of move into this role and start to build it out as what I envisioned CS enablement to be. So that was kind of my journey there. I really believe that all of this is about you. Like, if you want to transition, whether that's into CS or out of CS into another role, it's really about focusing on those things that you're passionate about. The two things and the advice that I got was that you are your own brand. So for me, a lot of what was kind of what I was able to do was just doing everything that I could do to develop professionally. Zach mentioned LinkedIn. LinkedIn courses and LinkedIn Learning is a really fantastic tool that I took full advantage of. A lot of the courses are free. A lot of them are available. You can kind of get some of those little badges and things that pop up as well. Mentorship. So using things like CS and Focus, using things like different communities that are available in the space that you're interested in, going to networking events, kind of reading industry books, podcasts, all of those really contributed to what I believed about CS and the space that I was moving into. The other half of that was just kind of building my own brand. It takes time, it's hard work. I'm not the best at it and I'm continually learning, but just being willing to share ideas, be generous with your time, have an opinion on the things that you're passionate about, host webinars, investigate webinars. All of that really helped me to establish what I felt and how I felt about the brand. And I've had folks reach out to me just strictly from information and content, for example, on LinkedIn or webinars that I've done as well. Barring all of that, really it's about timing. And I cannot stress anything more enough than sometimes it's just about being patient and waiting for the right role at the right time. It sounds really, really cliche, but some of my key takeaways from those experiences were really for you to understand the skill set and personality needed for your next career move. So when I was in operations and I was moving into, account management, I knew that I needed to be a little bit more social, be a little bit more able to connect more quickly, understand what the issues were, the root cause of whatever that objective was for the individual I was speaking to. Know that you need to still be able to be organized and manage your time. So that was something I think that's really important. From a CS perspective, CS and operations skill sets tend to be different. The personality and the folks who enjoy the things that occur in those two respective roles tend to be different. So likely you're not going to see a CSM necessarily enjoy moving into an operations role or vice versa. Sometimes you have those folks, that do enjoy that. And maybe they weren't in that correct role to begin with. So I think that's just an interesting thing to note. The other thing is, and I cannot stress this enough, find a mentor or a group that you can learn from. There are so many places out there where you can join a group and be a mentor or mentee to individuals who have done things in the space. So I think that that's really, really an interesting thing. There's tons of communities now that are available around CS or other spaces that I think will be really great. I know Gango Retain is one. So many Slack groups similar to kind of this that allow for you to find somebody and network. And then lastly, like I said, timing is everything. Just play the long game. Know that you have a goal. You want to take a role that matches what you're passionate about, what you want to do. And with all of the different kind of startup spaces, established firms that are out there and in the CS industry, I think that there is going to be no shortage of finding like that exact role that you want to take over. And if it's not there, the nice thing is if you start with a smaller company, likely you can evolve or fight for a role that you think is valuable to the company and that you'll enjoy.
Thank you, Bora. That was great.
Sure.
Awesome. So I saw a couple questions pop in. Star, do you have?
Oh, there's a good one that came through.
Go for it.
Yeah. All right. So, and I want to know the answer to this too. How much of CS operation role that you're involved in right now is internal challenges versus more external?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. Luckily, a lot of our CS challenges are more how do we make our processes better for our customers rather than change management behavior. So ChurnZero is a customer success platform. So we're kind of in a unique space to be advisors and consultants to CS teams and their leadership. We know how important it is as a company and culturally to be transparent, to be clear, to follow processes. I think the biggest challenge internally is scaling. It is for any company. How do you keep that infrastructure? How do you make sure that you're maintaining the same quality and level that your customers are, were there for when you were 500 customers versus 10,000 customers kind of thing. So I think that balance right now is probably 30-70. 70% being external and 30% being internal. I think it's ever changing though, right? It's some years it's more internal, some years it's more external. It just depends on where your company is as an organization and what you're looking to achieve.
You answered the other question that came in is what is the other communities in which you can learn from? And so you mentioned Gain, Grow, Retain.
Yep.
So great community, highly recommend checking them out as well. Of course, CS and Focus, that's why we're all here, or the Toronto meetup. Are there any other communities that you would make a recommendation on?
I think there's a women in CS community that that is fantastic. I think there's CS leadership, which is also fantastic. It depends on what you're looking for, but I would say those are really good places to start. And once you start networking, you'll find other communities that are also really, really useful, depending on what your specific objective is, right? So if you're looking for operations, there's operations specific type communities. The ones that I mentioned are more general CS spaces where they can go into operations, leadership, CS specific, CSM specific roles and things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so passing it back to you.
All right. Thanks, Bora. All right, Geoff, you're up. So as you set up, I'm going to just walk through your intro. So Geoff is currently a product manager at PartnerStack, and prior to that, he managed the team of CSMs and was a CSM himself. Over his time at PartnerStack, he's actually seen the company grow from 20 people to upwards of 120 from seed to Series B. Before his time at PartnerStack, he worked at as a supply chain analyst for Freshii, one of Canada's leading fast casual restaurant chains. And today he'll be talking about his career at PartnerStack in the past 3 years and how you can think about yours in a similar way. All right, on to you, Geoff.
Cool. All right. Yeah, how's it going, everyone? Hope this the screen's come through. Yeah, thanks, Maheen, for the intro and for allowing me to come on and talk here. Really excited to share kind of what I've gone through and on my career journey over the last few years, and hopefully impart some lessons as well. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about moving specifically from customer success to product management and what that's involved. A little bit about me. Who am I? Currently a product manager at PartnerStack, as Maheen mentioned. Also used to be a CSM and CSM manager. I also used to teach Latin dance in Toronto. So if anybody ever took salsa or bachata lessons at Steps, I may have been there. But I've been dancing for about 14 or 15 years now. And then as tough as it was this year, I am a Raptors fan. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. Also think it's worth mentioning who I am not. It's a maker of beautiful slides. And so for the rest of the presentation, I encourage you to read what's on there very briefly, but most of it is going to be off slide. So what I'm going to be covering, two main things. So first is when thinking about switching roles, first, figuring out what you want to do. And second, figuring out how you get there. Seems like a pretty logical kind of flow. And I'm going to talk about it in two senses. So first, I'm going to talk kind of generally about the steps that I think people should be taking. I'll also talk about how those steps came to fruition in my journey and exactly what I did. Unfortunately, this is the last slide that Gordon comes on, though. So starting out, the first thing that I think people should think about in terms of thinking about whether or not their current role is right for them, or if you're thinking about a role change, how you think about which role is right for you, is thinking about what you've enjoyed in your work. And so for me, this came in a few different places, and there's lots more here, but to keep it on one slide, I limited it to these four. So first, I realized I really enjoyed building relationships with customers. Second, solving complicated problems. Third, seeing people, whether it's internal users or customers, get value from the features that I've recommended. And last is working with data. And so when you start to think about the pieces in your role that you enjoy or in your past roles, that will really help shape your thinking going forward of, hey, first off, do I want to switch? Or does my current role give me enough enjoyment that I'm in a really good spot? And this comes not just switching organizations between, for example, customer success to product, but also switching specific roles, for example, from being a customer success manager to a people manager on the customer success team. And I'll talk about that shortly. And then equally as important, I think it's a really, really important kind of retrospective to run on what you do not enjoy and what you have not enjoyed in your past roles. So for me, as Maheen mentioned, I used to be a supply chain analyst at Freshie. And while I loved working with data and I loved food, I did not love supply chain. And this was really helpful for me because when I had the opportunity to go back to Freshie, I learned a lot. I really liked the people. I wanted to do something else, and I knew that. So I think that, what a lot of people don't realize is that seeing what you have not enjoyed in your past role is equally as important as what you do enjoy. So for me, it's supply chain, working in a silo, and being removed from the product development cycle. So this was a really interesting one for me. And it kind of relates to one of the sections that I did enjoy, which was seeing people, whether it's internal users or customers, get value from the features I recommended. When I started at PartnerStack, I was the 20th employee, and we had a product team of 2, and I was on the customer success team. And so because our product team was so small, and I'm sure this happens at a lot of organizations, the customer success team ends up being the kind of pseudo product manager. They help when there isn't enough bandwidth. And so a lot of what I was doing in my early stages as a customer success manager at PartnerStack kind of got stripped away once we grew our product team, and they were able to take on this entire role of building the backlog, prioritizing, working with customers, and then working with the engineering teams. And so this was actually a really formative learning for me, in the sense that I enjoyed this piece of my work, and then it got taken away as the company grew. So this was kind of my first step to realizing, hey, maybe product is something that I would enjoy. So that was kind of the catalyst to me looking into product. And shortly after, I realized that a lot of the other elements of work that I enjoy are also in the product role, such as building relationships with customers, working with data, solving complicated problems, pieces of non-PartnerStack work that I gained. For example, teaching dance. I taught a lot of beginner classes, and something I love about product is developing a new feature and figuring out, okay, there are 30 things I could talk about when running through this feature, but there are different audiences at each demo I do. So I'm doing one demo for sales, one demo for CS, and then I'm doing a demo for some of our customers that are working with us more closely. They each need to know different things, and I need to talk to them differently. And so that kind of related back to the skills I was learning and really enjoyed when I was teaching beginner versus advanced classes, dancing. And so kind of, that and many other things, I realized product would be very enjoyable for me. And so I started to look more into it. So the key takeaway here is to really, understand both what excites you and what doesn't, and then research for a role that you'll enjoy based off of that. For me, it was product. For you, it may be marketing if you really enjoy writing. It may be sales, being an AE if, as Zach talked about, you enjoy building relationships with customers and want to move into that more sales piece. That's that would be a great fit for somebody like that. So what I would encourage is to, look for you specifically and not to, look elsewhere in the market and see what other people are doing, but really think about what you enjoy and what's going to make you happy. So the second piece is, how do you get there? So the first thing here is once you understand, what role you're going for. So for me, it was product. You have to understand what skills are important for that role. So the first, the 3 things here that I'm going to talk about are, first, to look at the job descriptions for those roles, not just at your company, but kind of out in the industry, and see what companies are looking for. Second, reach out to those that are already working in that role and learn what skills that they value. So not the companies that are hiring, it's kind of separate from the job description, but them specifically. And then third is to practice the skills that they tell you. So I'm going to dive more into the second point here. And why I want to highlight that kind of separately from the job description and how I kind of went about this is why you want to talk to people that are in the role itself is because job descriptions I find are not perfect. And I don't think I'm alone in thinking that. It's very tough to nail a job description, and there's a ton of superfluous information. So a job description may say you need 10 skills, when really, if you were to be perfect at 4 skills, you would nail the job. So by talking to the people that are in the roles, you get a sense of what really matters. And then when you start going after that role, you know what to highlight. So getting the inside scoop here is really important, and it's not just a formality. But also when you reach out to those people, you start building connections so that eventually when you want to make a move into that role, you can reach back out to them for tips on interviewing or for leads, whether or not it's at their company or if they can make introductions to other people. This is a really important skill to develop. And then practicing those skills on repeat, I think goes without saying that while you're in your role and are building up to make a transition, once you've found out the skills that you want to practice, it's really important to set yourself up for success. And so for me, that meant running projects at my company that worked with the product team and showcased my skills, made it clear to them that I had the relevant skills for the job. It was kind of going back to the early days at the company where I was doing some of that pseudo product management work and starting new initiatives when they didn't exist at the company, to put myself in those positions. Which kind of leads me to the next point here, which is, again, when thinking about how you get there, you have to look for the opportunities and place yourself in front of them. So in some cases, you run into opportunities without trying, but it's not common. So you're going to have to do the work and you're going to have to put yourself in a spot for success. And so the two things here are kind of internal and external. So the first is, and this has been talked about already today, but make sure that your boss and other hiring managers for the role in your company know that you want to make the move. For me, this was talking to my direct manager, Emma, at the time, and then also Star. And that made it so much easier because they were able to work with the product team. And when there was a role that came open, basically, I didn't have to keep pinging the product team and say, hey, is there a role opening? Is there a role opening? Like, I'd made it known to the company. Star and Emma had my back, and they were all they were looking out for me like good managers should, which very lucky to have at PartnerStack. And so it just makes your search that much easier. So the first is make it known that you want to make that transition. And then the second is look for the opportunities outside your company. So whether it's using LinkedIn, talking to people, not just about hey, are you hiring? But again, talking about the skills that are relevant, talking about things that you're doing to prepare yourself for the transition. All of these conversations lend themselves really well to when you eventually want to make the move, people being able to vouch for you or people feeling comfortable with putting you in touch with a hiring manager at their company. And so I was lucky I didn't have to do the second piece to move into product. It was an opportunity that was available at PartnerStack. But the main takeaway for this is to plan in advance. So expect your transition to take time. Once you find out what you want to move into, it's not going to happen in a day. It's not going to happen in a week, and it probably won't happen in a month. But if you're planning to make the move in 3 months, that gives you a lot of time to reach out to people on LinkedIn, to let your boss know, hey, I want to move from customer success to product. What can I do? To ask for feedback and to start taking up initiatives that lead you there. So yeah, that's been my journey in a nutshell. I hope this was helpful in terms of if it's something you're thinking about and making a career transition, how to think about it. Yeah, happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Geoff. All right, over to you, Star. I saw a couple questions pop in.
Yeah, a lot of them had the same theme. And by the way, I paid Geoff to give me a positive shout out there, just if anyone was wondering. So Alex asked a question that was built on a couple times throughout chat is, did you encounter any hurdles related to your technical knowledge that you may have had to overcome by going into product? And if so, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, very good question. So in product, there's this idea of a technical product manager and a non-technical product manager. And what I'll say kind of first and foremost is you can be successful as both. So I am a non-technical product manager. My team focuses on reporting and analytics. I know a basic level of SQL, and I taught myself that in the customer success role. So the first thing I'd say is that if you're starting in a customer success role and you've been at your company for a little bit, you should have a general understanding of some of the tech stack that your team uses. And so even if you're a non-technical PM like myself, there shouldn't be that big a hurdle, and there wasn't for me, unless you're joining a very technical heavy team. So for myself, there wasn't that technical knowledge that I had to overcome, but that's not to say that I haven't wanted to improve that understanding for myself. So one example is my team is working on restructuring our pipeline, like our data pipeline, how data comes in and where it goes out. And a lot of the conversations that my engineering team have used to go over my head, and they don't anymore. So I suppose that's the biggest hurdle, but more so language and not knowledge, because I'm never going to understand how to code as good as an engineer would. And that's not my job. So I'm not trying to overcome that hurdle and learn how the code works, but just as long as I can have the conversation with them and understand at the end of the day what needs to get done, how close it is to getting done, if there are any blockers. That's really, I guess, what requires overcoming.
Excellent. In the last minute, Geoff, I'll ask you the last question before we pass back to Maheen to close it out. It sounds like you did a lot of research as it relates to what are the quality skills required to be a strong PM. Can you share maybe what those top 3 were?
Yeah. So the first thing I think is being able to ruthlessly prioritize. And this is one that I think it's easier said than done. And especially coming from a CSM background, like you come onto the product team and I instantly wanted to have our team focus on squashing all the bugs. But then you have to balance the business priorities, prospects that are coming in and want certain features. So you have to work with sales teams, and it quickly becomes, it quickly kind of shows you that, okay, there's feature work, there are bug squashing things that we can do. I can't just fix all the bugs. And so it kind of requires putting aside your personal preference and being able to prioritize, 1, based on data, 2, based on the business priorities, and 3, based off customer requests and feedback. And then kind of, a distant 4th is your own personal thoughts. So the first, prioritizing and ruthlessly prioritizing. The second, I would say, is a really kind of unspoken one, is leading without being in a position of authority. So as a product manager, you're working with an engineering team. Most organizations, or at least most SaaS companies, work on an agile or scrum team. And I am not a people manager of anybody on that team, but it's my job to convince them that, we've heard XYZ from a customer. This is the value that it's going to bring. It's going to lead us in the right direction. And this is what we should focus on for the next 2 weeks. And so being able to do that requires being able to lead without, actually having any authority over someone. So that's the second. And then the third, I would say, is being able, this is something I touched on, being able to tailor, your communication to a different audience. So understanding who you're talking to at every turn, being able to kind of give off the points that you need to satisfy their questions and their needs without wasting their time or going too in depth, going too into the weeds when it's not going to benefit them or it'll just confuse them. So I'd say probably those are the top 3.
Excellent. That was a long minute there, Geoff. Maheen, in like 20 seconds to wrap it up. Do you want to close us out?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you guys. So thank you, Zach, Bora, and Geoff for great presentations. We had awesome questions from the audience. So guys, this is it. We're wrapping up for the summer. We'll be back in September. So keep an eye out for our upcoming event in September and August with our new theme. If you haven't done so already, join our Slack channel and see us in focus. Yeah, thank you all for joining and spending some time with us today. For that, we'll wrap and close that exactly at 6. Thanks all.